The mission to put humans back on the lunar surface has always been trapped behind a wall of cold math and empty pockets. For a long time, the central problem was that you simply could not carry enough fuel to get a large crew to the moon and back in a single ship without the rocket becoming too heavy to lift off the pad. The weight of the propellant needed to land safely was so high that it required a vehicle far bigger than anything humans had ever successfully flown. NASA tried to solve this by breaking the mission into tiny, expensive pieces using different vehicles that had to meet up in space, but this was dangerous and cost billions for every flight. Experts at the highest levels of engineering said that a single, reusable ship capable of carrying a massive crew to the moon was a fantasy. Then SpaceX released their October 30th, 2025 mission plan and proved the doubters wrong. This is the story of how they turned a math problem into a moon landing. The challenge of reaching the moon is mostly a struggle against the pull of Earth. The moon is 384,400 kilometers away, and getting there is only half the battle. To get a ship into space, you have to move very fast to break away from our planet's gravity. This takes an incredible amount of fuel, which is very heavy. In the old days of the Apollo missions, the only way to do this was to throw away almost the entire rocket on the way there. You started with a giant tower of metal as tall as a 36-story building and ended with a tiny capsule about the size of a van splashing down in the ocean. This made every trip a one-and-done event that cost taxpayers a fortune. Even modern plans from big companies like Boeing and Blue Origin have struggled with these mass limits. They tried to build ships that were light, but those ships didn't have enough room for the crew or the supplies needed for a long stay. The conventional wisdom was that you had to choose between a ship that was safe and a ship that was affordable. You couldn't have both because the heat of deep space travel would fry the electronics and the fuel requirements would make the ship too heavy to launch. SpaceX looked at this impossible situation and decided to change the rules of the game. They realized that the secret wasn't building a bigger rocket on the ground, but building a smarter way to move fuel in space. This is where the transformation really happens. Instead of trying to carry all the fuel for the moon trip from the launch pad, Starship goes up mostly empty to save weight. Once it is safely in orbit around Earth, it meets with a series of tanker ships that fill its tanks to the brim. This means that when Starship finally leaves for the moon, it has a full tank of gas while already moving at thousands of miles per hour. This architectural shift changed everything. It allowed the ship to be massive, with 600 cubic meters of pressurized space for the crew. That is 2/3 the size of the entire International Space Station, all inside one ship. They didn't just find a way to make it work, they found a way to make it better than anyone thought possible. Here is how they actually did it. The key innovation that solved the weight and power problem is the Raptor engine. While old-fashioned rockets use simple engines that are either on or off, the Raptor is a full-flow staged combustion engine. This is a very fancy way of saying it is the most efficient engine ever put into production. These engines use methane and liquid oxygen, which burn so clean that the engines can be used hundreds of times without needing a deep clean. On the October 30th mission plan, SpaceX showed they could use 33 of these engines on the Super Heavy booster to create 17 million pounds of thrust. That is more than twice the power of the Saturn V that took us to the moon in the 60s. But power isn't enough. You need control. The breakthrough came when they perfected the belly flop maneuver and the landing flip. Because the Raptor engines can throttle their power up and down very quickly, kind of like how you can press the gas pedal in your car a little or a lot, the ship can fall through the atmosphere like a skydiver and then flip upright at the last second to land on its tail. This solved the problem of reusability and allowed the ship to land on the moon without needing a giant, heavy landing gear system. The victory for this approach is already showing up in the numbers. When you look at the competitive scoreboard, the gap between SpaceX and the old way of doing things is staggering. The NASA SLS rocket, which is the traditional way to get to the moon, costs about $4.1 billion for every single launch. To put that in perspective, that is enough money to buy a brand new car for every single person living in a mid-sized city of 100,000 people. Meanwhile, the SpaceX Starship is designed to eventually cost as little as $10 million per flight. That means for the price of one SLS launch, you could fly Starship 410 times. Even the Crew Dragon, SpaceX's smaller ship, is dominating the market. It flies astronauts for $55 million a seat, while Boeing's Starliner has cost the government $4.2 billion and has struggled to complete a single successful crewed mission without major software or valve failures. SpaceX isn't just winning on price, they are winning on frequency. They have successfully landed the Falcon 9 booster over 200 times. They have turned rocket landing from a miracle into a routine business. This technical mastery didn't happen by accident. It happened because SpaceX embraced a process of rapid testing and information hunting. While other companies spend 10 years drawing pictures on a computer before they build a single part, SpaceX builds pathfinders. They build a tank, they blow it up, they look at the data, and then they build a better one the next week. This is why they chose to use stainless steel instead of carbon fiber. Steel is cheap, it's easy to find, and it actually performs better than fancy materials when things get extremely hot. By using steel, they were able to build the massive 50-meter-tall ship much faster than any competitor. The ship uses a heat shield made of thousands of small hexagonal tiles called Pika-X. These tiles are designed to handle the 3,000-degree heat of re-entry without falling off. In the October 2025 plan, they demonstrated that these tiles could survive the trip to the moon and back multiple times, which is the holy grail of space travel. The competitive landscape shows that the old guard of aerospace is being left in the dust. Blue Origin, owned by Jeff Bezos, has spent billions of dollars but has yet to reach orbit with a human crew. Boeing's Starliner failed its first big orbital test because of a simple clock error in the software. These are companies that have been around for decades, yet they are being outpaced by a team that works in a literal shipyard. The strategic intelligence of SpaceX was to realize that the mission isn't about the rocket, it's about the system. They built the launch tower, the chopstick arms to catch the rocket, and the autonomous drone ships all at the same time. This is David versus Goliath, but David has a machine gun. The numbers don't lie. SpaceX now launches more mass into orbit than the rest of the entire world combined. They have reached a level of competence where they are no longer just a contractor for NASA. They are the infrastructure that NASA relies on. The breakthrough revelation of the October 30 plan was the simplified lunar architecture. Before this, everyone thought you needed a complex space station called the Gateway to get to the moon. SpaceX showed that Starship can act as the space station itself. Because it is so large, it doesn't need to dock with anything else to keep the astronauts safe for weeks at a time. It has enough room for science labs, sleeping quarters, and even a gym. They solved the life support problem by using a closed-loop system that recycles air and water with 98% efficiency. This means they don't have to carry as much water, which saves even more weight for scientific gear. This is how they actually did it. They stopped trying to build a moonship and instead built a moving building that just happens to have 33 engines on the bottom. What does this mean for the future? The transformation of the impossible into the routine is nearly complete. We are moving from a world where we visit space to a world where we live in space. Because the cost is dropping so fast, we can start thinking about things that were once crazy, like building a permanent base at the lunar South Pole to mine for water ice. That ice can be turned into more methane and oxygen fuel, creating a gas station on the moon itself. This would make the trip to Mars much easier. Starship is the key that unlocks the entire solar system. It turns Mars from a science fiction dream into an engineering problem that we already know how to solve. Once you have a ship that can land 100 tons of cargo on the moon for a fraction of the current cost, the moon becomes just another destination, like an airport. The mastery displayed by the SpaceX team has silenced the critics who said a private company could never handle the complexity of deep space. They proved that by focusing on technical details and moving fast, you can overcome hurdles that have stopped governments for 50 years. They used autonomous docking systems that are more precise than a human pilot could ever be. They developed grid fins, those giant metal waffle irons at the top of the rocket, to steer the booster back to the launch pad with centimeter-level accuracy. Every part of the ship, from the Raptor engines to the stainless steel skin, was designed to be part of a reusable machine. They didn't just build a better rocket, they invented a new way for humans to interact with the stars. The competition is now scrambling to catch up. China is moving fast with their own moon plans, but even they are still using old-fashioned rockets that get thrown away. The victory validation for SpaceX is that everyone is now trying to copy them. Every new rocket design you see today has reusability as its main goal. But SpaceX has a 10-year head start. They have the data from hundreds of successful landings and a few spectacular explosions. They aren't afraid of the information hunt. They know that every mistake is a step toward the breakthrough. The October 30th plan was the final piece of the puzzle, showing the world that the impossible moon mission is now just a matter of checking boxes and following the flight plan. When you look at the consequences of this breakthrough, it changes how we see our place in the universe. For most of history, we were stuck on one planet. Going to the moon was a rare and dangerous thing that only happened a few times, but now the door is open. We have a heavy-duty transport system that can move people and gear between worlds. It is like the invention of the steam engine or the airplane. It changes the map. The moon is no longer a light in the sky that we just look at. It is a place where we can go to work. It is the first step in a journey that will eventually take us to Mars and beyond. The technical mastery of the grid fins is another great example. Even though the rocket is moving faster than a bullet, these fins can guide it to a landing spot that is only a few feet wide. This is like trying to balance a pencil on your finger while you are running. The software and the motors that move those fins are incredibly advanced, yet they are built to be used over and over again. This is what the magician archetype is all about, taking something that seems impossible and making it look easy through sheer skill. To protect the ship during its return to Earth, it uses a heat shield made of thousands of small black tiles. These are called Pica X tiles. They are made of a special material that doesn't let heat through. When the ship hits the air at 17,000 miles per hour, the outside gets hot enough to melt most metals. But these tiles stay strong and keep the steel body of the ship cool. The breakthrough came when SpaceX found a way to make these tiles in large numbers and attach them so they wouldn't fall off during the shaking of a launch. This was a major problem for the old space shuttle, but the Starship design is much more robust. If a few tiles get damaged, they are easy to replace before the next flight. The competence hierarchy of the space world has been completely reset. For a long time, people thought only big governments could do things this difficult, but SpaceX proved that a focused team of engineers could move faster than a giant bureaucracy. They use a method called the information hunt. Instead of arguing about a design for years, they build a prototype and test it to the breaking point. If it blows up, they look at the cameras and sensors to see what happened. They find the pattern of the failure and fix it. This is why they have been able to land their smaller Falcon 9 rockets more than 200 times. They turned a miracle into a boring, everyday event. That is the ultimate sign of mastery. The decision to use methane and oxygen as fuel was a strategic masterstroke. Most rockets use kerosene or liquid hydrogen. Kerosene is easy to handle, but it leaves a lot of soot inside the engines. This makes it hard to use the engines again without a lot of cleaning. Hydrogen is very powerful, but it is hard to keep cold, and it leaks through tiny cracks. Methane is the middle ground. It burns very clean, so the engines don't get dirty. This allows SpaceX to fly the same engines over and over again with almost no maintenance. Also, you can make methane on Mars using the CO2 in the air and the water in the ground. This means that when we go to Mars, we can make our own fuel for the trip home. We don't have to bring it all with us. This is the kind of long-term thinking that makes SpaceX different. They are not just winning today, they are setting themselves up to win for the next 50 years. The system mechanics of the October 30th mission plan are elegant in their simplicity. It removes the need for a complex space station orbiting the moon. Instead, Starship is the station. It removes the need for a separate landing craft. Instead, Starship is the lander. It removes the need for an expensive return capsule. Instead, Starship is the return vehicle. By making one machine do everything, you remove hundreds of places where things could go wrong. You don't have to worry about two ships docking perfectly in a far-off orbit. You just have to worry about one ship doing its job. This reduction in complexity is what makes the plan so brilliant. Every big number in this mission highlights the scale of the victory. When we say Starship is 120 meters tall, that's as high as a 40-story building. When we talk about 100 tons of cargo, that's as heavy as 15 fully loaded pickup trucks. When we mention the $4.1 billion cost of a single SLS launch, that is enough money to buy everyone in Houston a new car. These comparisons make it clear why Starship is the only way forward. You cannot explore a new frontier if the cost of getting there is too high for the average person to comprehend. SpaceX has taken the financial wall and knocked it down. They have taken the technical barrier and jumped over it. They have taken the timeline and shortened it by decades. This is the definition of a breakthrough. It is not just an improvement, it is a total transformation of what is possible. The October 30th plan also focused on the human side of the mission. Because Starship has so much room, the astronauts can bring things that make life better, like more fresh food and better exercise equipment. They can have private quarters to sleep in, which is very important for mental health on long trips. In the Apollo days, the astronauts were cramped in a space the size of a car for a week. They couldn't even stand up. Now, they have more room than most luxury apartments. This is the difference between surviving a mission and actually living in space. It changes the psychology of the crew. They are no longer just test pilots in a dangerous machine. They are residents of a new frontier. This is how we move from being a species that visits the moon to a species that belongs there. The pattern recognition involved in this success is visible in every part of the ship. SpaceX engineers noticed that most rockets failed because of small, complex parts that were hard to build. So, they simplified. They used fewer parts and made them stronger. They used the same engine design for both the booster and the ship. They used the same fuel for everything. This simplicity is what makes the ship so reliable. It's the same reason a hammer is more reliable than a complicated machine. There is less to go wrong. But making something simple is often harder than making it complex. It takes deep technical mastery to know what you can cut and what you must keep. The SpaceX team has shown they have that mastery. They have stripped away the waste and the bureaucracy of the old space age and replaced it with a lean, powerful machine that actually works. The strategic intelligence of the mission extends to the launch site itself. By building their own spaceport in Boca Chica, Texas, they freed themselves from the rules and schedules of government launch pads. They can launch whenever they are ready, which allows them to hit the high frequency of flights needed for the October 30 plan. They can test and build and fly at their own pace. This independence is a key part of their victory. They are not waiting for permission to go to the moon. They are building the road themselves. This is a competitive advantage that no other company has. They own the entire chain, from the factory to the launch pad to the rocket itself. This is why they are winning. They have removed the middleman and the red tape and replaced them with direct engineering action. The breakthrough is now a routine part of the plan. The tankers are launching, the main ship is refueling, and the landing sites are being prepared. What was once seen as a madness by the experts is now the foundation of the world's most advanced space program. The October 30 plan isn't just a document. It's a reality that is being built out of steel and methane every single day. The transformation of the impossible into the routine is the ultimate goal of the magician, and SpaceX has achieved it. They have turned the moon into a reachable destination. They have made the stars feel like they are just a short flight away. They have taken the dream of a multiplanetary future and made it an engineering problem that we are already solving. SpaceX didn't just land a rocket, they made it routine. Over 200 landings while Boeing's Starliner hasn't flown crew and Blue Origin hasn't reached orbit. The impossible became infrastructure. Now, Starship aims to do the same at 10 times the scale, turning Mars from science fiction into engineering problem. The transformation is complete, and the stars are finally within our reach. We are watching the biggest breakthrough in human history unfold right before our eyes. The moon is just the first stop on a very long and exciting trip. The era of the reusable, affordable, and massive spaceship has arrived, and it is changing the universe forever. One launch at a time, the impossible is being turned into the history books. We are the generation that will see humans become a multiplanetary species, and it is all because of the technical mastery and the bold vision of a team that refused to believe in the word impossible. The road to the stars is now open, and it is paved with stainless steel.